And feel free to share your mindset in the chat as we move along. I also want to start with giving this quote about healing. And it's from the Voices from Campfire, Establishing the Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander Healing Foundation. This quote kind of really resonates with me. Healing for me is reconciling myself with my history, my family, and the associated heartache, despair, trauma, addictions, self-doubt, and hopelessness that comes with an inability to truly connect with other people because no one understands my pain, loss, and questions. When I read this quote, I think about some of my students who've been sitting in front of me in my classroom and feeling that isolation and lack of connectedness. And I would want to do everything I could to help them not feel that way, not feel so alone. And then this wellness definition is from the World Health Organization, and it simply states that wellness is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmary. So when we talk about being well, we often are talking about our physical wellness. We're not sick, right? We're well, but we also need to think about our emotions. Are we well in our emotions? Are we well in our thoughts? Like, how are we really doing? And then the last definition I have is mindfulness. And this definition of mindfulness is from John Kabat-Zinn. He's the founder of Stress Reduction Clinic at the University of Massachusetts, and he writes a lot of scholarly things on mindfulness. And this is his definition. Mindfulness is awareness that arises through paying attention on purpose in the present moment and non-judgmentally. Tonight, we're going to think about ourselves first and what that looks like. So the 4 social emotional intelligences are self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and relationship management. Tonight, we're going to talk about self-awareness and self-management. And then our next webinar will be part 2. And we're going to, Annalise especially, is going to talk about social awareness and relationship management pieces as it relates to your leadership. All right. So I'm going to read we're going to read some statistics to you, and I want you to listen mindfully and let it sink in for a minute. So we'll pause after each one to give you just a moment to let it sink in. So 80% of K-12 educators indicate that burnout is a serious problem. Chris?
Sorry, next one is 78% of teachers feel symptoms of stress and depression.
The next one is 55% of educators now indicate that they are ready to leave the profession earlier than planned.
%10 of educators would strongly recommend the profession to a young adult. Chris?
Sorry, it's like I'm taking all these in. It's like I'm having all the feelings, Brandy, all the feelings. Researchers estimate that there are more than 36,500 teacher vacancies in the nation. They also estimate that there are more than 163,500 positions filled by teachers who aren't fully certified or are not certified in the subject they are teaching.
Approximately 75% of Americans report that stress affects their physical and mental health negatively.
All of these statistics were taken off the NEA website, and the link is in the slide deck.
Brandy, is it okay if we share the slide deck link with our participants?
Yes, and I think the link is on the beginning,
Okay,
like the
I'll put it.
interview slide, yeah.
I'll put it in the chat too.
Okay, sounds good. All right, so we know that the field of education is experiencing significant shortages across the board, all educators, and our students are really suffering because of it. So not only in our schools, but as individuals, as teachers, there's high rates of people, of children, of educators, of our family members that have experienced trauma, compassion fatigue, burnout, chronic stress, long COVID, living paycheck to paycheck, toxic working conditions, depression and anxiety. These are at all-time highs in this world. And it's not just the United States, it's worldwide. And on top of all of our individual healing needs, our world is also experiencing this collective trauma, war and COVID and economy. We're up against these philosophies that put one team against the other team, and one has to win and one has to lose. We have an energy crisis, we have clean water crisis, food shortages, climate change, violence from extremism, toxic news that bombards us every second of every day, and inflation is hurting people in this whole world. So attending to healing now is timely and necessary. Sorry. Nope. That was my cat again. If you have a cat, you know that you can't tell them what to do. All right, so we're going to take a minute to put some thoughts in the chat and hopefully have a nice silent conversation using the chat box. So think about this question. What would it look like if everyone attended to personal and collective wellness? What would that world look like? So about 60 seconds just to kind of think and pause, and 60 seconds to have a little chat about it. I'm seeing lots of really good stuff in the chat. More connected, better health, more understanding, less judgment and divisiveness. More empathy has come up a lot. More compassion has come up a lot. People doing more of what they love. A sense of co-care. We're responsible for each other's well-being. More joy. Peaceful, individually and in community. Enjoying what we do.
Hey, Brandy and Annalise, I kind of have a wonder as as I've been watching all this like good thinking share out in the chat. Like, I'm seeing it kind of like in my mind, I'm putting it in two categories. One is like, okay, kind of what can I do internally, right? How can I make changes and think differently and come up with systems that allow me to interact with my world in ways that are healthier, and others which are kind of like more system changing, right? Like if the system was different, then right, like
Mhm.
I just I've never really kind of thought about it from these two perspectives, and I was just wondering if is that
So that's a really good question. Tonight, we're going to talk about what you can do for personal wellness. And there's a lot of just simple things you can do. And mindfulness is definitely that glue for that piece, and mindful practices. And next session will be really more about systems and how we can influence systems as the leaders that we all are.
And I
Great
would
question.
I would just add to Brandy that it's a both and. I think all of this is important in thinking about self-care, preparing us for the movement, not the moment. In order to sort of stay in this fight and be sustained in it, we have to attend to our own needs, but then we also have to continue to push the system to change because it can't be on the individual solely. So I love thinking of it not as a you have to pick one, but a both and.
Great. Were there any questions in the chat that we should address before moving on?
I'm not noticing questions, but I'm noticing like lots of really good ideas of things that mostly center about self.
Great. All right. So if we look at a lot of the research that's out there, there are several versions of this wheel that talks about your personal wellness. And, most of them have these seven components in there in some form. So the first component really is the spiritual component. And, spirituality is something that humans really we have a part of our brain dedicated just to that. It's self-sacrifice for others, our nation. It's thinking about the greater good. We also have our emotional wellness, which is just understanding, accepting, and regulating our own emotions. We have the intellectual needs to be curious and engage with new things and explore and learn. And we have our physical wellness, which is eating, nutritious foods, drinking water, exercise, all of those physical things that we need to do to take care of ourselves. And social wellness, I think, was damaged a lot by our lockdowns and COVID, but it's really the awareness of the impact that you have on your community, society, and nature, and being aware. And I have a feeling that this group is full of a bunch of really socially aware people. Taking care of your environment is the environmental need. So, not just, it's about, tidying up your space, keeping your house neat. It's also like, taking care of other people's environment by being responsible with energy and water use and recycling and all of those things that you may have committed to for the environment, for your environment. And also the financial wellness is a big part of taking care of ourselves. And some of these aren't so much fun, but they are part of taking care of yourself. I think that oftentimes when we think about self-care and putting on our own oxygen mask, we focus only on like relax, go for a walk, take a bath, drink some tea, read a book. But those are all like kind of nice things to do, and it doesn't necessarily help if you're not paying attention to all these other areas in your life. And so sometimes, like, the areas where you feel the most lacking is the area where you need to do the most work, and not all of the work is super fun. All right, so now this question: what would it look like if we worked in an organization? And this kind of gets to the systemic piece. that attended to personal and collective wellness? Like, what would that look like? Seeing some good things: balance, less stress, taking care of human needs, team approach, less guilt.
Teacher retention. I mean, Rachel hit it
Yeah.
off, right?
People would stay in the profession, yes.
Kimberly brings up a good one, right? Like less guilt when you need to take care of yourself. Uh, I mean, there were many years I lived outside of the United States, and this is a very uniquely American thing that we we work through the pain, right?
Mhm.
Which I think is now it's not nice that we are having this conversation, but I think it's healthy for us to engage in this conversation about like, you know, sometimes the most important thing for you to do is not go to work that day.
Mhm. Yes, definitely. Annalise, do you want to talk about this one?
Yeah, and so I was really excited to see this report from the Surgeon General that just came out on workplace mental health and well-being. And I think as everyone has kind of been sharing in the chat, you know, the last 2.5, 3 years have really put, I think, mental health and well-being at the center um, of not only sort of what is needed and required to be whole and to lead a healthy life, but to really thrive in whatever role you're in. And so what was exciting to me about this report from the Surgeon General was that it was looking at how to really transform work and workplaces to be centers of well-being as opposed to feeling like they're transactional in so many senses soul-sucking places. So what I think is interesting about this chart is first just to note the protection from harm at the top. You can't feel safe and feel well-being in a workplace if you don't feel psychologically safe, if you don't feel physically safe, and if you don't feel a sense of security. And I think those two things are really the entry point to thinking about workplace wellness and well-being. And I'll just note too with this diagram, unions were involved in this work. So I think you'll see at the center, worker voice and equity needs to be paramount in workplaces, regardless of the structure. And so in addition to that, looking at how connection and community is cultivated. Do folks feel a sense of belonging? Do they feel like they have social support? What does work-life harmony look like? Do they have autonomy in their jobs? Do they have flexibility with their schedules? Feeling like they matter at work? Do they feel like their work has meaning? Do they feel like they have dignity in the work that they do every day? And then opportunity for growth. Are folks feeling in workplaces like they can progress and move forward and feel a sense of accomplishment and that they are being supported in their learning? So I think this is just a really interesting diagram to think about what workplaces could look like and how we might think about structuring them in order to bring them closer to well-being and mental health.
Thanks. Yeah, this changed my life when you shared it with me, Annalise. So I'm so happy we can share it with more people. All right, so the question was, what can we do, to take care of ourselves? And because we only have an hour, we're going to focus in on this mindfulness, this idea of mindfulness, which has a lot of trending right now, I think. And there's a good reason for it, because there's research that shows that, being mindful does help with wellness significantly. But there's also a lot of misinformation about what it is. So briefly today, we're just going to talk a little bit about mindfulness and what the benefits are. And then we're going to do a little mindfulness practice. And then we'll have some Q&A with the people who have joined us. All right. So the first thing, just thinking about mindfulness, practicing it really brings awareness to how your body, mind, and emotions affect your reactions to people or situations. And this awareness allows you to respond thoughtfully instead of habitually. And so that to me is really the key right there. You can't always change your outside environment, but you can change how you're going to respond to it. And mindfulness helps you get to know yourself. It helps you take a pause and think before you act. And it's not fancy. It can even be kind of boring. You just maybe are paying attention to how the water feels on your hands when you're doing your dishes. It could be that simple, right? Just being present. Mindfulness versus that habitual can look like this. So if you're being mindful, you're taking feedback, you're using I statements to resolve conflicts, you're really celebrating the success of others because you believe that we're all in it together, and what affects me affects you. And if I'm well and happy and fulfilled, you're well and happy and fulfilled, and vice versa. Being honest with yourself, you learn to quiet that inner critic. I think that everybody has this voice inside their heads that can get kind of loud sometimes and just tell you you're not good enough, because the world is hard and you get a lot of external feedback that tells you you're not good enough sometimes. So quieting that inner critic and learning to accept yourself, accept your responsibility. And mindfulness is making restorations when needed. So if you make a mistake, you try to make it right. If you're acting habitually, you're lashing out. Sometimes you put a lot of blame on others. You're not being reflective at all about what your part is. You might pout if you lose or you felt like you lost. It could look like just taking unnecessary risk. When you feel this angst inside of you and you don't know what to do with it, you might just decide to go drive your car really fast or something. You also might just agree with someone just to not make waves, right? Just say, even if you really don't agree, and even if what they are saying is really harmful to others. Becoming defensive about feedback, and also multitasking when someone else is talking. I think we all do that. It's somebody is telling us something, and Zoom has made that super easy. But it's habitual, right? Your phone bings and you respond, your email bings and you respond. We've been trained with those bells and those noises on our devices by some pretty smart scientists who know how to get your brain to become addicted to and react. We also might make excuses. So that's like the difference between mindfulness and habitual. When we are being habitual, we're using our lizard brain, which is our amygdala. And when you're using this brain, it's meant to save your life. It's meant to, help you react really quickly when your life is in danger, you perceive a threat. And that's not bad, but what happens inside of our bodies when it happens is large amounts of cortisol gets released, and cortisol is the primary stress hormone, and you just get a whole bunch of it. And when you have that level of cortisol in your body over a long term, it's very harmful to your health. Cortisol's main purpose is to help you regulate your body stress, supports your metabolism, regulates your sleep and wake cycles. It regulates your blood pressure and your blood sugar. So when your cortisol levels are not healthy, you can, gain or lose weight. You can have inflammation, high blood pressure, high blood sugar, sleep disorders. So by practicing mindfulness, you really do keep your cortisol levels balanced and healthy. If you're using your wizard brain, you're focusing on, how your body is, just being really aware of your body, your mind, your emotions. You're pausing, you're being in the moment, you're being analytical about your emotional responses without judgment. If somebody makes you mad, that's okay. It doesn't mean that you're a bad person because you get mad, right? But it gives you an opportunity to say, I'm mad and I'm okay with being mad, but I don't have to lash out at this person. I can, take a breath and use an I statement to communicate instead of really lashing out and being hurtful and harmful. So that's just what's going on in your brain. Mindfulness also, it builds resilience. And there are like brain scans that actually show that it builds resilience in your brain, but it gives you like that better control of your emotions. It helps with acceptance, seeing what can and can't be changed for yourself and for others. It gives you that self-compassion. You shut down your inner critic. You don't sabotage yourself so much. Growth, it opens your ability to see new opportunities and possibilities because our lizard brain is calmed and quiet. Our wizard brain can look on the world with awe and wonder. And creativity is in your wizard brain, and mindfulness practices really do activate that creative thinking and gives you a chance to really explore with your right brain, which we tend to not do. I don't even know that we value that so much in this society, but that's a whole nother topic. And we have improved relationships. Our emotional regulation is better. Our non-judgmental listening is better. So all of those things, when you can master them, which nobody ever masters them, we are a constant beginner in this this journey to seek, higher awareness. But being a beginner, you can continue on your journey and continue to get better and grow and build that resilience. And over time, outside influences or internal influences don't have such a traumatic reaction in your body. And mindfulness also builds emotional intelligence. So you reason with your emotions when you're being mindful, you're observing them non-judgmentally, and you can just make better decisions by recognizing what you're feeling, understanding that where the emotions are coming from, and developing self-compassion. It's okay that I just got triggered by this conversation. I'm not perfect, I'm human, and I accept that, but I can regulate and respond appropriately, knowing that I was triggered instead of just blindly, lashing out. So do we have any questions or anything before we move on to our mindfulness practice?
I haven't seen any questions. Again, some great comments and conversations happening in the chat. But we were just, I have to tell you, how much, Brandy, I love this lizard versus wizard analogy. I'm listening to you talk about this, and I'm thinking about a lot of those thoughts you kind of have in your head that kind of tear your own self down. I want to put a little sticker on some of them as they filter to the front of my brain with the lizard on it, so that I can make sure that I recognize, right,
Lizard stickers. Well, there's your side gig.
yeah, little mental lizard. I'm gonna copyright that. I just did it. Everybody heard, right? Okay.
All right. So this next activity, we are going to be doing a little bit of practice. We're going to do some mindful listening practice. And while you do this practice, You're going to sit comfortably. You can close your eyes if you're comfortable. You don't have to. I love closing my eyes. That visual stimulation is really distracting for me. So closing my eyes is good for me, but other people are very uncomfortable with it, and it's okay either way. And you're going to just kind of start by focusing on your breaths. You're going to do smooth inhales and smooth exhales through your nose if you're comfortable doing so. And you'll just start to pay attention to that rhythm of your breathing. You might pay attention to how your chest is expanding and contracting with each breath. You can picture your diaphragm moving down as you breathe in and up as you breathe out. And you're going to listen to this piece of music without judgment, without criticism. You're going to notice the pace of the music, the sounds of the different instruments, or the shifts in volume. You'll notice if you're more aware of certain part of your body as you listen. Do you have a place in your body that really resonates with the music? Notice any thoughts or feelings that come up. Perhaps the music is connected to a memory, or perhaps an anxious thought is trying to pop through. Let any thoughts just pass through your awareness, and then gently bring yourself back to the sound of the music. I'm going to start the music now. Continue to breathe. As you settle in, take a moment to breathe and check in with your body. Breathe.
Brandy, the music isn't really playing.
Oh, you know what? I know why. Hold on. I'm going to stop sharing
Yeah, you got to
because
do
I
that.
didn't share my
box.
sound. Yep.
Yep.
I thought of that earlier and then I forgot. Let me find the right screen to share. Sure. All right. Thanks for stopping me. I hope everybody is just continuing to breathe while we wait for this to load up. Good.
Yep, you're good.
So just continue to breathe with slow and smooth inhales. Slow and smooth exhales. So does anything feel different? Do you notice any shifts after listening to the piece of music? Do you feel calmer? Now open your eyes and consider some of these prompts. How did this affect your emotions? Can you name them? Notice how your body felt before, during, and after the exercise. Was this an easy exercise or a difficult exercise? Why or why not? Were you able to refocus when you became aware that your mind was wandering? Did you have difficulty with holding judgment? Take a moment just to consider those. and then post in the chat what you can name, what you noticed, and maybe some reflections you had of the experience. Noticing some really great reflections. So that was 1.5 minutes of your life, and you practice mindfulness successfully, and many, many people feel a lot of benefit from that exercise. There's research out there that if you spend just 10 minutes a day, breathing, meditating, doing some, mindful practice of some sort, journaling, anything really that brings you into that present moment, it can bring your blood pressure down and have a whole lot of health benefits just with as little as 10 minutes a day. So I'm wondering, when you're working with other adults in your building, I know there's a lot of coaches and leaders that work with other educators, and maybe you have other groups in your life where you're working with adults. Just take a moment and consider, how can you implement something like this or some mindfulness practices within the work you're already doing to promote healing and wellness within yourself and the world. All right. So now is an opportunity to ask some questions. And I think, Annalise, you're going to start us out with some questions.
Yeah, thank you so much, Brandy. I feel so relaxed after that. So I have the privilege and pleasure of asking Chris Thomas, our wonderful resident educator and all things technology guru, just some questions about, this idea of putting on your own oxygen mask first. So I'm going to ask you, Chris, some questions, and, hopefully you can model like vulnerability in talking about this, because it is hard to talk about self-care as educators. It's not something that's easy for me. It's not something I know that's easy for a lot of people. So I was just wondering if you could share how you model for other educators how to put on your oxygen mask first. Are there things you do?
Annalise, thank you. So very like generous. I appreciate the kind words, but and maybe Sarah Van Loo, you can help us here too with your 2 cents. But I mean, it's hard. Like, let me just tell you, like, I am not good at putting my oxygen mask on first. Like, I feel bad when I say no. I feel like I'm letting people down. I know it's my lizard brain now that I can like put a sticker on it. But it is a difficult and it is difficult and intentional. I am really good about putting up guardrails though, and I think that is really helpful for me when I'm thinking about taking care of myself. So I have a 14, 12, and 10-year-old at home, and those that my family is a priority, and those have helped with those guardrails. But it's Annalise, it's a struggle. I'm seeing Sarah Van Loo like really do a lot of head bobbing. How is it for you?
Well, I think a lot of what people have said in the chat really resonates with me. We were talking before we came on that a lot of folks in this group have school age kids or younger kids, even toddlers, and mine are in college now, which we're finding, my husband and I, who's also a teacher, we're finding that as empty nesters, which is so weird, that we finally feel like we have some moments to ourselves in the evenings where we can start to do things specifically for ourselves. And the more pulls we have on our time, the more challenging it is. And I know we have lots of teacher leaders in this group, and it is hard to say no. And I find that when I do say no, I always say no with a reason. Like it almost feels like I'm making an excuse, because I want to say yes to the things that I really am passionate about. And I think maybe that's been the one thing. And I am always consulting with my husband. We're good friends and we're in the same profession, but that's one of the things that we've talked about with each other a lot, is saying no to things so that you can leave the time and space to say yes to the things that you are really, really passionate about, for what that's worth.
No, I think it's worth a lot. Like I'm also a building leader for our EA, and it's almost like it's always really clear for other people in my mind, right? Like I can be very clear when I'm helping members kind of sort through these issues for themselves, but when it comes to me, it really is like I have to stop and take a moment to reflect on it. And Sarah, you were talking about those conversations you have with your husband Bill. Like I have the same with my wife Christy, and like thank goodness that I have a partner who then I can kind of like reflect and come back to. And I profession generally is we want to say yes, right? But we also know that we can't say yes to all the things.
I think both of what you shared are just really real stories and experiences. And I will say, some of the things I wrote down from what you both shared were having guardrails and kind of knowing your why, because I think also what you were talking to, Sarah, in being able to say yes to the things that really matter to you. I think knowing your why and what sort of are your really important things that fill your cup and actually like feed you are really important to be making time for, as opposed to everything. So I'll just highlight the having the guardrails with your family or your things that you can't take away, and then understanding your why to kind of help lead you in figuring out your time. So I'll just ask you both then, are there tools and resources as education leaders that you've used, as you've grown in your own leadership, that have helped you, be able to model some of this, or to be able to, learn about how to take better care of yourself? Is there any tools or resources that you've picked up along the way?
Yeah, Sarah, go right ahead.
I was just, Annalise, you had mentioned the I statements earlier, and that has been profound in our family, being able to say, I feel this way. My first teaching job was in a school where that was modeled in every classroom. And I remember that my own kids went to that school. I did some of my student teaching there. And then when I first finished my certification and spent several months subbing, I remember talking about that with a student in a situation where I was a guest teacher, and the student said, well, isn't that for little kids? I said, no, I use those with my husband, my children. We all use them with each other. Being able to identify your own feelings. And I realize that's not, I'm an ed tech person, so I'm always thinking about the ed tech tools, but those like personal strategies for naming your own feelings and sharing them in a non-confrontational way has been a huge thing. And we would always say to our kids, when you are grown, your dad and I still want to be friends with each other. And we're best friends. And part of that is because we can tell each other how we feel in a non-snarky, not like a comic strip kind of way. And I statements are a really big part of that. So
It
thanks
sounds,
for mentioning that.
yeah, well, it sounds like communication, like open communication,
Yes.
and like what you were saying around like being able to recognize your feelings and emotions, being able to express them to others. You're giving a little bit of a foreshadow of what we'll be talking about in January too, because I'm going to get into a little bit on nonviolent communication and just being able to say I statements, which for a lot of people is challenging to do. So that's really helpful, Sarah. And thank you for sharing all of that.
Well, I appreciate you like naming it.
Oh my gosh, that was amazing. I want to kind of talk. I threw a link in the chat. I mean, this is 10-year-old professional learning that went around. Remember Simon Sinek and the Golden Circle? I'm sure you do. You probably watched it at least half a dozen times at different things. But like I really like that really resonated with me, and the reason is that like if I filter all of these things through my why, it gets a lot easier for me to say yes and no. I'm a much like Sarah. Like I feel like compelled to tell people why I can't do a thing, and my wife is always telling me like they don't need to know. You can just say no, right? Like it's all right. Like you don't need to make an excuse. You don't need to worry about their feelings. Um, but like centering my why really helps me filter like the parts that I can and can't do. Now, sometimes there are things that I'm required to do that are not centering my why, and those are other duties as assigned, right? Like those are things that are required by professional organizations. So like as a professional, I will do those, but I also recognize that it is existing outside of like my core value and belief around why I continue to come back every year and come back to school.
That's awesome. Well, I want to leave some time too to see if we have any folks that are on the webinar to ask you both questions or things that are coming up or resonating for folks. So in the chat, feel free to put what's resonating for you as we talk about putting on your oxygen mask first. Is it something you feel like you've been able to get better at? Is it feel like something you continue to work on? And again, I loved what Brandy said. This is a practice that none of us ever get to decide, okay, we've checked this off our box, we don't have to think about self-care again. So it's a practice we're all engaging in together. And I think thinking of it as a communal pursuit, I think I wrote in the chat, we can all be each other's accountability partners. We can all find someone in our schools and workplaces that we can lean on to support us and that we can support in this work. And that I think is what makes self-care so powerful, or well-being so powerful. So any questions or things that are coming up for folks? And Brandy, I don't know if there's anything you would want to ask too.
Yeah, I do have a question. I just am wondering, Chris, especially because you said like this is really kind of new thinking for you. Like after this webinar, are there things that you're thinking about maybe trying out, not only for yourself, but for how you work with other educators in your leadership roles? And Sarah too, if you have ideas. I can't hear you for some reason.
We
What is
lost your
happening?
audience. There you go.
There we go. Sorry, little
Okay.
web gremlins there, I guess. Yeah, no, it's not that the thinking is new. It's just like it's difficult. It's hard. Like I have to fight against my I don't know, 40 years of practice that didn't kind of center myself and didn't maybe like focus on my why, right? So like I think that it's just I think the first step is like recognizing that you're not good at this, right? Like this is not something I'm good at, and that I need to be really intentional about the decisions I make and how I make them, and like making the time and space to reflect on them, making the time and space to care for myself, making the time and space to like make sure that there were some great ideas in the chat about people like their practices as they're on their way to work or when they're getting home after school, and like what that does and how that supports their own well-being. Like I think that those things just like require time and space and practice to get better.
So I want to challenge you. You said I'm not good at that. I want you to take that judgment out of that statement, and I want you to think about
It's my lizard brain, Brandy.
how
That
can
was my lizard brain.
how can I make this important enough to take the time to do it, right? And that just nobody's good at it. It's hard, and we all have monkey brains that make us constantly thinking about random thoughts all day long, and to not do that for even a second is really hard. But everybody has the ability to do it, and you're not bad at it ever. We're all beginners all the time.
I just like I took a snapshot of that in my head, Brandy, and I will replay that as my as I work against the lizard brain. Thank you.
Thank you. Sarah?
I was just thinking of what Chris was saying and picturing it in Brandy's soothing voice, because she always just she sounds so mellow all the time. I love it so much. All right, so I have to admit, Brandy, when you asked the question, I was looking at Chris and thinking about what he was saying, and then I missed the second half of your question.
I was
So
just wondering
sorry.
like how you could implement like some of this healing mindfulness work with some of your work as an educational leader, right?
Oh, thank you. Yes. The funny thing is I started to actually type that question in the chat for everybody, even as you were asking it. So it's funny that it wasn't processing it. I think a lot of it is that idea that you were talking about earlier of, and I did write this, mindful versus habitual. For me, a lot of it is about slowing down and thinking about what's happening in the moment, because I'm the oldest in my family, for whatever that's worth. So I've always had a tendency to like react kind of authoritatively, like with my siblings, and that's carried over for a lot of years. So when I hear something and I know that it may be something that other people need to know as well, how I approach like sharing that information or making sure that people have what they need, like taking the time to think about how other people are feeling in that moment and how I actually am feeling in that moment, versus the strict go straight to that habitual pattern. I think you're right, Chris. Absolutely. And then Chris could tell you, we in our district, we had an early release day today, and we used that time to discuss equity issues. So we're in small group meetings, and I'm thinking back to the things that people were saying in that meeting and wondering how my response could be different, and to kind of help guide the conversation in a way that's really constructive. And I think that that's a huge thing for me, is like trying to be constructive and kind of help people see each other's perspectives, and what are things that we can do that we actually can accomplish in the moment and long term. So it's kind of a roundabout way of saying that idea of being mindful versus reactive, and then sharing that with other people, or not reactive, but habitual. Yeah. And then sharing that with my team.
Yeah, I like how you said slow down. I think that would be a great message to leave people with today, is slow down. We don't have to do everything fast all at once. We can do one thing and do it really well with compassion. All right, so Annalise, you want to just quickly share about our upcoming opportunities?
Sure. So I am very excited to be continuing on this great session with a part 2 of really focusing on leading, healing, and well-being for ourselves and others. And specifically, we'll be looking at the leadership competency framework and the social emotional intelligence competency domain. And we'll be looking at 3 of the themes around social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision making. So I'm really excited for it and hope you can all attend. And then for any and all things social emotional learning and student mental health related, check out nea.org/SEL. There's great courses, great articles, great resources that you can go to. And that page is being continually updated. So you can find, all the latest and greatest that NEA has to offer.
Nice, thank you. So before we leave, just want to end with a parting thought for so take a little moment to relax, a little gift to yourself, and appreciate yourselves just for showing up for others and all they do to support us. Appreciation for our fur babies, our families, for the earth's gifts of food, water, and air. So may you be well. May you do good. May you and all beings be free and know it till we meet again. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everybody. Annalise, Brandy, Sarah, Anne, appreciate all that y'all do to make things like this happen.